Hi folks, welcome to the channel. In this video I want to take a look at a new tent I've bought. I've been looking for one tent to try and cover all my needs year round. Possibly asking for the Holy Grail, but I'm going to give it a go. I've got a couple of other tents in mind as well. So look out for future videos where I'll take a look at some of those, and across each of them I'll try and highlight sort of pros and cons as I see it for my needs on each of the tents and see if I can settle on one. I've got a suspicion I'll probably end up settling for two tents, and they'll replace the two that I currently have. I'll go into the ones I've got in another episode, but for now I just want to concentrate on this one. It's the MSR Access 2. It's the green one. It also comes in this colour of orange as well, but I got the green one just because I prefer that sort of colour when you're wild camping. Just keeps you hidden a little bit more. I just wanted to do a first impressions of the tent. It's not a full review. I've not spent the night in it or camped out in it. I've just had it set up in the garden. So yeah, I'll get it unpacked on the table, see what it comes with. So the tent comes in this handy stuff sack. It's got this kind of top or side opening, which makes it a lot easier to stuff away, roll it up and stuff it away, rather than trying to cram the whole tent in through a small drawstring opening at the top of the bag. So that's quite nice. It's got these compression straps to cinch it all down. You can see it actually compresses quite a lot into quite a small sort of cylinder shape. So you can really cinch that down and get it into your bag in one piece if you want, or I guess you could take all the parts out. You could put the fly sheet right at the bottom, maybe the inner inside some other dry bag area, and have the poles down the side of your backpack, whatever you prefer. So you've got a few options there. So opening up the cinch buckles, so you've got a drawstring here, kind of like a little storage mat as you're packing it up. So I bought mine second hand, and the person who owned it before me had bought a small ground sheet for the, it's like a triangular shape for the porch, or for one of the porches. They're identical on either side. Haven't used that yet, but probably quite handy for the side that you're storing your rucksacks and things, just to keep it off the ground, and then the side that you go in and out of the tent, you probably aren't too bothered about because you'll be walking in and out with your boots and so on. This is a standard ground sheet which fits a number of MSR tents. I'll talk a bit more about that later in the video. Again, you have to buy this separately. It doesn't come with the tent, but the previous owner had bought this as well. And then we've got you can see the base of the inner. We've got a small peg bag here. I'll go through that first. So that's got your MSR groundhog stakes. So they're somewhere about 6 or 8 inches long. Standard MSR groundhogs, not the small ones. They don't have any cordage on them, which I'll probably tie on because that's handy for pulling them out of the ground. And you get 8 of those. So you can see the outer fly sheet there wrapped up inside the inner. I believe there's not that many guy lines attached when you buy this. I think it comes with 2. Again, previous owners upgraded it slightly and added some MSR reflective guy line to a couple of the other points. So you'll see that in the pitching video as well. I didn't put them all out, but you will see them attached in the video. And we've finally got the pole bag, which is the the Eastern Cyclone composite poles. You can see that material there. So they're sort of plasticky sounding, carbon fibre sounding poles. I'll talk a bit more about them as well later in the video. So in terms of weights, all in this is about 2.1 kilos. So if you take off the weight of the ground sheet and this other little porch ground sheet, and then any additional guy lines, you're probably getting pretty close to the manufacturer's weight of 1.8 kilograms, I think. So the ground sheet weighs nearly 300 grams. It's quite heavy. So unless you want to pitch it outer first, which is a bit tricky anyway, you might want to consider leaving that at home. The floor of the inner seems robust enough. And this one, that's 95 grams for the small porch footprint. Yeah, so you can save nearly 400 grams by not taking them. So yeah, that takes the weight of the tent down to about 1.8. So you can see, rolling this back up around the poles, getting this back into the tent bag is just a breeze. Shove those bits on top, pegs go in with the flap. Draw the string. And cinch that all down. Get all the air out. So that's super easy, like that. Okay, let's have a look at it getting pitched. As you can see, it's an inner pitch first. That didn't put me off buying the tent because there are ways to pitch the outer first. Although a little bit more fiddly, it does give you that option. So yeah, for me, the things that I liked the look of on this tent was the inside space. So obviously being two-person, there's plenty of room inside. You can get 2 full-size mats in there, which I'll show in a minute. Well, I've got one large wide mat. I'll inflate that, and I'm pretty sure you can fit 2 of those in side by side. You got plenty of head height in there. I think it's about 42 inches, and it's quite light, so you could get away with carrying it on your own. I think all in with the pegs and bags and ground sheet that it comes with, probably about 2 kilos. I'll put the weights on later. So yeah, it's a little bit on the heavier side for one person to carry, but if you're trying to find like one tent to do everything, I think this is getting close to it, especially if you want to have 2 people in it comfortably. So initial things that I'm not too keen on, and typically since buying it I've seen videos which show some other negatives, is the porch. If you look here, the overhang above the inner is not really going to keep the rain off if you want to vent this zip. So you've got this double zipper here, you can zip down and vent, which is alright if it's not raining, but if there's any sort of sustained rain, you're just going to have this zipped right up, and there's no other ventilation on the fly. This is the older version. I think it got updated in 2019, where the ends have vents. So this one doesn't have any ventilation in the fly whatsoever, so you're relying on maybe pulling this out. If there's a bit of a breeze, you get some airflow under there. But again, I think otherwise you can use the door to vent, but not when it's raining. And the other thing is, the fly doesn't fix to the poles, and I think in high winds, in fact I know because I've seen it on other videos, that might be a bit of a deal breaker. So what I'm going to do is try and get out in the wild with the tent, test it out in different weather. If it doesn't do well in the wind, so what I've seen happen is the wind blows up under the fly flattens the inner, and the inner pulls the poles in with it. So the guy on the fly, this one here at the end, is just left holding the fly, and the inner and the tent, the inner and the poles collapse onto the occupant. So if that happens, I think, and I like everything else about the tent, then what I'll probably do is on the inside of the fly, I'll stitch a tie and tie it to the hub of the poles. So if we have a look in here, you can see the hub there on the inside, but that's not connected to the fly. The fly just rests on it, and they've reinforced it just to prevent abrasion. But for me, I think, I don't know if it would potentially cause damage to the poles, and this is by design perhaps. They want the poles to slip around on the fly sheet. It doesn't seem right to me. I think it would be far better if there was some sort of strap that went through the centre of that hub and held the fly sheet in place, so then any tension on the guy line is going to support the frame as well, the poles. The other thing I noticed is the crossbar, the cross pole there, that goes up and over. It doesn't tie or fix onto the ridgeline pole. I think the newer model's got like a swivel which holds them both together, which is a far better idea, because again, if it's blowing strong wind, I can see that pole I can move it with my hand. I can just push that pole along there like that. So if there's a lot of pressure on the fly, that pole just moves around and just destabilizes the structure a little bit. I think putting a nylon tie crisscrossing the diagonals, sort of from here to here and here to here, would help a bit. But in severe winds, the nylon will just slip on the pole. The tie will just slip on the pole. And of course, if I sew in ties, I'm going to have to seam seal the stitching holes, and I'm then kind of risking damaging the fly. So I'll have to be very careful if I do decide to go down that road. But time will tell. Yeah, I need to get it out and test it. Also, you can see here there's the hook of the inner. The plastic hook there, you can see it under the fly, and again, it's not sharp, but it's not blunt either. And I don't know, I just feel like these sort of things it would be better if the poles were in a sleeve, or the fly clipped to the poles like an exoskeleton, and the inner hung from the fly, because the inner doesn't need to clip onto the poles really. If the fly's clipped onto the poles. But yeah, that's the design of this one, and we'll see how it goes. So what else do I like about it? It's pretty quick to set up. That was my first time setting it up, so I'll put the time on the screen, but I reckon it took less than 10 minutes, which isn't too bad. Okay, I haven't pegged everything out, but I'm pretty sure once I've got used to that, I could pitch it in 10 minutes with all the pegs and the guys out as well. Pitching it in wind I think might be tricky, because the fly just slides around all over the place when you're initially setting it up. If the wind was coming from this direction, left hand side, that would be fine, because the fixed part of the door is there. The door doesn't roll all the way back. I guess you could put some sort of hook down here which would allow you to, roll the door right back. But as you don't have a fully opening inner, I don't think there's much point. There's no need to roll it right back, because you can't see anything out that side anyway. It's solid. But yeah, if the wind was coming from this left hand side, you could sort of put your stove in this area and get a bit of cooking done in a bit of shelter. And then if we go around to this side, you'll see the door opens opposing. So if the wind was coming from that same direction, then it's going to catch the the fixed side and blow the tent around. So that's fine. You would use this side to store your gear and just leave it zipped up. Yeah, so the wind would just funnel right in there, and that wouldn't be very fun. So you can leave that done up, all your gear in there, and a bit of cooking around the other side. So that's quite cool, and it means if you're pitched on a little bit of an incline, you can decide which way you want to sleep. If there's two of you in the tent, you don't get that luxury, because the other person will have to turn around to get out the door. But that's very minor. If you're on your own with the tent, it's a great feature because you can take your pick. So, having a quick look at the inside, I do like these end pockets. They're up off the ground, which means things don't get stuck under your mat, especially if there's two of you in here. Because the inner is clipped onto the poles, you can put batteries and phones in there, and it's not going to sag down the ground, which is quite nice. And you've got some little ties up the top. You can probably rig up some sort of gear loft, because the ties are in every corner. So that's above the door. You've got one in the centre, you've got one on the other door, and you've got these other ties on the ridge line. So you can have a decent gear loft. You could probably dry out a mid layer and socks and things by having them up high there. You'll get your heat. And or you could just simply tie a line across. In terms of getting in and out, I don't know, it's probably hard to tell if I'm not really out in the wild, but I find I always want to try and keep the inside of the tent as dry as possible. So if it was raining, I don't know, I just feel like the inner is still going to get the rain. I don't think there's enough room to get in. It's just got these little toggles. They're quite easy to use one-handed. I don't know about with gloves on, but that wasn't too hard one-handed. So I don't think I can get in the porch with the inner closed. So, this is meant to be a winter tent. I just don't see that working. You come in here with soaking wet gear on, you're going to have to get into the inner. But yeah, I think get in as quick as you can, zip the fly up, dump your bag down there, get all your wet gear off, and then unpack your sleeping stuff. Otherwise you're just going to have way too much water in the inside, and all your nice warm sleeping layers will be soaking wet. Another nice little touch is the fluorescent cord locks on the doors, so you can find them in the dark when you need to rush out for when nature calls. The door zippers work really well because the inner is there's so much tension on the inner. You can easily work these one-handed. Really easy. Something I notice on a lot of tents, and this really winds me up, is the way they sew the zips on to the material. They never seem to hem the material first. They just chuck it straight on the zip, and then you end up with this raw edge here, and eventually it frays and then it catches in the zip,
the only way you can really do anything with that is by getting a flame on it, which is pretty nerve-wracking when you're dealing with a tent this price. You can do it. What you don't want to do is go anywhere near the bug mesh with the flame, because it just melts instantly. But you know, this fabric here, I've run a flame very quickly along these things before, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's not fun to do it, but when it starts getting caught in the zipper, it's about the only thing you can do. You can snip it off, obviously, but it'll just keep fraying. So it's good to try and get it cauterized, or whatever you want to call it, melted. So on a dry night, or not raining but maybe damp, you can unzip the fly and you'll get some ventilation through the small mesh window at the top of the door. But you know, as soon as it starts raining, that's going to run in. It's going to run in towards the inner and drip down, probably land somewhere here, because that's slanting outwards. So it's going to drip down onto that white fabric. It will probably run off because it's pretty steep, but I think eventually it would wet through. I'll have to see. But I think you really want to open that up both sides to get some airflow across the tent. So you would do the same on this side. Open your door, grab that zip, and it's got this Velcro here, so that stops it popping right open, and then zip yourself back up again. That might just give you a little bit of a breeze and sort of prevent condensation on the top of the tent.
So earlier in the video I said I would get the sleeping pads into the inner. That didn't happen. I was filming at relatives just before dinner and got distracted by a massive juicy steak, and we got chatting, and one thing led to another, and I didn't get that bit done. So here I am set up in the house. So what have we got in here? If we have a little look. So that is my Thermarest X-Therm Max, which is the rectangular one, and it's the large wide, which is 25 inches wide. I can't remember the length. I'll pop it on the screen. But you can see there it fits really nicely into the inner lengthwise, and according to MSR's website, the width of the inner is 50 inches. Now, next to that, I've got my old Mountain Equipment Helium self-inflating mat, and it's a regular width, which is 20 inches. So, allegedly, there's 5 inches to spare, but it's not looking that way. I think if you forced it, you'd probably get two wide mats in side by side and sort of push the inner. See how the inner is a bit sort of diagonal, sort of leaning in. It will probably push it out a little bit like that, but I think you'd get the two wide mats in. Yeah, so for one, it's a palace. For two, you can see at either the head or the foot end where the walls lean in, you lose a little bit of headroom, depending on how tall you are. So as I say, this Thermarest on the right is the long, and I'm 5'9", so I'd say my feet are probably about a foot from the end, actually. I'm kind of just touching the inner there with my size 10s. And at the head side, let's just flip the camera. So at the head end, you can see I've got, I don't know, probably about 3 or 4 inches there. Bearing in mind I've still got a foot of space down at my feet. That's my arm up against the inner now. But, you know, it still feels really comfortable. I can sit up. My head just brushes the inner as I sit up. And then in the middle there's so much space. I mean, I've got probably a foot of clearance above my head. The height of the inner is 42 inches. So even sitting on the thermarest, there's just loads of space in here. If I'm in the middle of the tent, I've still got plenty of headroom. So, you know, 2 of you can sit opposite each other, cross-legged. There's enough room to kneel. I kneel on the mat there. Yeah, I mean, there's enough room to kneel comfortably in the middle, so you can easily get tops on and off without having to lie down. It's not a struggle. Just taking a quick look at the door toggles. So they've got the standard toggle on a piece of nylon, but instead of having to fiddle that through a nylon loop, they've put on this plastic ring, which makes it really easy to just do with one hand. So that's the ring there. Door goes back. Don't know why it's necessary to do it with one hand, but it works when you're filming. I've seen a lot of people fiddling around with these things when they're filming their tents on YouTube, and that one is pretty easy to use. So I would imagine with 2 hands and gloves, it's as easy. If we take a look at the poles now, so these are the Eastern Cyclone poles, which are a composite material, somewhere between carbon fibre and aluminium. So more flexible than carbon fibre, I believe, and stronger than aluminium. If you look at the video on the MSR website, there's a shot of them bending the poles in rather a tight circle. I still suspect at the joints here, you have to be careful to make sure that they're properly connected up, so that the inner piece of the join has as much contact as possible with the outer sleeve. Just be very careful to make sure they're all done up before you bend the poles and put any pressure on them. You can get a lot of flex out of this system without too much concern. So back to that topic about the fly in this hub here. You can bend that right down like that. So that's like a good foot of movement. Nothing there to raise any alarm bells, no weird creaking or cracking sounds. But at the same time, as I said earlier, the fact that it moves that far is a little bit concerning. I'd like to have that tied onto the guy line. Now I also got a footprint with my tent, so it's the generic MSR footprint, which also works on the Hubba Hubba. So I wanted to see if I could get the outer pitch first, and following a video from Mountain Masters, they recommended these little tarp clips. So I've had a little play around with them, and you're not supposed to need them on the corners, but I found trying to put the poles into this grey loop, as soon as you bend the poles, they just pop through the loop, and you can't put the tent up. So I've got 6 of these on this ground sheet, 1 at each corner and 1 either side in the centre for the cross pole. So I'll do another video on setting that up outer first, and whether it's worth the extra faff. I won't hide the fact that I've been browsing the Scarp 2 online, which may just tip the balance in terms of ease of use, and also the inside space might not have the same height, but it's squarer at the ends, so you don't lose that head and foot room top and bottom. So that's it, folks. Well done for hanging in there and listening to my endless waffle about this particular tent. If you want to see me pitching this tent fly first rather than inner first, have a look out on my channel for the next video. And if there's any questions, please put them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to get back to you and answer them. And any feedback as well. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.